Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. I read recently that when men and women are looking for a mate, they instinctively size each other up with regard to desirable features. Some important attributes include education, age, general appearance, social status, and wealth. No doubt lots of other criteria enter into it as well, for example, children from a previous marriage, generosity, humor, brains, vegetarian, likes to drink a lot or not. It all depends on the individual. One general assumption is that a guy making $40,000 a year might be okay as a friend with benefits for a woman making $120,000, but is not husband material. Despite what you see in Hollywood movies, the wealthy don't marry the hired help, they marry their own. We all know roughly our level of desirability. Taking all into consideration, a man probably won't expect a woman he sees as far above his level of desirability to do more than hook up with him, if that. Maybe we are all subconsciously thinking that somewhere along the path of courtship and marriage, sooner or later they will decide it was a mistake, and that they can do better. Whether this is true or not, it got me thinking that my wife and I are well matched. We married a bit later than our folks did, in our 30s, and now after 3 years we are beginning to talk about starting a family, maybe this fall. We're both decent-looking, very clever people from New England upper-working lower-middle-class families, if there is such a category. My family made more money than hers. My dad is a successful contractor from Springfield, but my wife's family had more status. She was an oops, born to a mother at the end of her childbearing years, married to an older man. Her dad was president of a small bank in town Southwick, Massachusetts. Those were the days when bankers made a decent living but didn't earn a lot of money. Her dad wore a suit every day, and everybody in town knew that sooner or later, they might need to go to him for a loan. He controlled money and people's access to it, and because of that, he had status. In our adulthood, we each graduated from college, her from a prestigious private college with no scholarship aid. Her mother worked for years to pay the tuition. I graduated from the local state college, which I put myself through with a little help from my dad. Karen majored in art history with a minor in political science. An interesting field of expertise to be sure, but a tough one to earn enough money to raise a family on. On the other hand, I had the brains to get into a private school, and Dad certainly had the money and urged me to do so. From observing my family, I realized that your success in life at our level in the world was more a result of your own initiative and brains than education. I learned the basics of running a business and how to think, speak, and write in more or less that order. The local state college suited me fine, especially as I could attend courses at Amherst, Smith, and MT Holyoke colleges more or less at will. I majored in history with a minor in business and took overloads every semester. After 2 years, I abandoned the liberal arts to get an engineering degree. I loved learning. I reveled in poetry, literature, and history for my soul, while balancing them with economics and engineering courses to challenge the practical part of my mind. I ignored students whose focus was the party life, and among the serious students, I made several fast friends that I still have to this day. During school, I worked for my dad during summers and learned the hard work and sweat side of the contracting business. After graduation, I learned the business side. I discovered that while good at it, I didn't enjoy management and new work. New work means new construction. I liked the old historic buildings, the craftsmen on site, the thrill of discovery as you remove layers of renovation, the sense of accomplishment you feel when you restore them to their former glory. You are honoring architects and craftsmen dead 50 years or more by giving new life to their life's work. I also liked to have an active hand in the work. I met an old man who specialized in decorative plasterwork and was seduced by the craft and his way of working. I spent 3 years as an apprentice to him and went on to develop very nice business as a small firm specializing in restoration plaster that included everything from the structural support of the plasterwork to decorative painting, gilding, and other ornamental work. I knew I wouldn't get rich at what I was doing, but it would provide a very good living. At 32 years of age, I carry on my payroll my former master, Anthony, his apprentice, a secretary, an office manager, and 1 laborer. I hire subcontractors and a host of the best restoration artists and professionals in the businesses needed. As a side note, I am nearly through writing a book on restoring decorative plasterwork with Anthony as my co-author. Oddly enough, while Karen went to school 7 miles away from my school, with 3 years of overlap, I never met her during those years. 5 years after I graduated, I met her in a bar when we were both back visiting our respective folks. Her father had died and her mom moved to Southampton. Karen had been married and divorced in the interim. She refused to say much about it other than her husband became abusive, which is all one has to say. In getting to know her, we talked about our common experience in and around Northampton. As it happened, she was a bit of a party girl in college. No thought to earning a living, no overloads, and no challenging classes. Having said this, you would make a mistake to assume she had a second-class mind. She was a smart girl but lazy. She never learned the pleasure of working on a difficult intellectual puzzle. I now realize this was the curriculum of choice for many of the persons who imagine themselves to be in the upper class. Not much work, lots of fun, and a prestige diploma. The real world comes as a surprise to people like that. She was surprised and a bit jealous to find I had taken courses from some of the same professors she did, although she tended to have taken introductory courses, and I talked my way out of those for the more focused and rigorous upper-level ones. It also irked her that I had spent some considerable time at some of these professors' homes, eating at their tables, meeting their wives or husbands, and discussing art, science, and life well into the night. Some of them regularly assist me now when I run into issues of conservation and don't know exactly what it is I am seeing emerge from under the pain I have to remove or what I have in front of me. The economic upbringing, educational, and regional connection created a bond, but I thought it was our intellect that deepened our relationship into love and finally marriage. The decision as to where we would live was easy. I mentioned at work that Karen was living in Philadelphia, and Anthony announced that, as he had family in Philadelphia, we all might as well move there. It was closer to the bigger jobs and property costs weren't as high, so we did. When I bought our house, the neighborhood was somewhat undesirable. She's got a part-time job with the local Democratic Party, and our social life has changed from a dinner and movie to a dinner and a play or the symphony. I've had to buy a black suit and a couple of $50 ties. Now, I cannot reliably pronounce the names of the French Impressionist painters with the proper accent, but one of the growing differences between us is that wifey can, and looks down on those who cannot. I am always clean and well-dressed, but prefer an understated look. Actually, I admire the way the relatively few wealthy ones who come from old money dress. Superb quality, but never were the brand names added onto cheaply made clothing from China. No logos showing. My casual cloths are worn, but not worn out. Our neighbors are similar to most people who are doing well for themselves. In my opinion, they are overgroomed, diet to the point of becoming scrawny, and show their class insecurity by wearing outrageously expensive designer clothing, with the labels on the outside so they can impress their peers. Jan, our neighbor's wife, is very proud of a hugely expensive watch that looks like a Chihuahua's collar. No taste. Despite my enjoyment of physical work, my business has shifting from me doing it myself, to me undertaking the business end of restoration. I still work with my hands and body as much as possible. I figured out that if my back goes out, I can't work. So I work out 3 times a week to ensure that I stay flexible and my muscle tone is good enough to keep me from getting hurt. However, I also like to eat. And while the weight lifting maintains muscle mass, it doesn't do so much about calories. My weight has been edging up a bit, and my business down a bit, thanks to the recession. Last February, I noticed that shirts marked large didn't fit so well when I sat down. While not obese, I do have a belly that I have to admit is larger than is convenient. By contrast, wifey has, as they used to say, kept her shape. It also occurred to me that my very desirable wife is surrounded with high-earning, good-looking, trim males, and I don't look too good by comparison. Further, I rationalized that you do have to call a stop to waistline creep somewhere, or you risk becoming a circus attraction. So when my daughter dumped her 125-pound, 2-year-old mutt named Prince Caspian on us, Cass for short, I used him to make a change in my life. Since I work out of our home much of the time, I got the job of primary caregiver to the dog, taking him for walks while my Karen does the brushing and the occasional bath. After a bit, she decided to rename the dog and wifey settled on Hubris. I wondered if she might have been thinking of Cerberus, the big 3-headed dog guarding the gates of Hades. She sometimes uses one word when she means another, but the words were a bit too different for that. Or maybe she liked the nickname Hubie and didn't realize it was short for Hubert. I didn't much care for the name, but what the hell, hubris it was, except when I had to holler it on the street. Then I shortened it to Briss. The dog doesn't seem to mind us calling him different names. One of the jobs of dog ownership is walking the dog, which should certainly be more than short defecatory rambles. Hubris is a remarkably good-looking fellow. People stop us to admire him. Well, formerly a he. There are a few essential bits missing now. Hubris isn't satisfied with a quick stroll around the block unless the weather is rotten. He likes to get a good, long walk. I started walking the dog several miles a day and discovered I really like to walk. In no time, I had lined up my day's phone calls, and we did a walk and call. We would spend an hour walking 3 miles every morning while I got my calling in. From there, it was a short hop to jogging half a mile, walking a half mile, jogging half, so we were covering 4 miles in an hour. I pushed it to 5 miles an hour, but the dog was struggling, so we settled on 4 miles an hour. At the same time, I shifted my diet as well, reducing the helpings of meat and eating more vegetables and a salad. No prepared salad dressing. Home dressings made balsamic vinegar, a bit of olive oil, and cheese. I used to joke that you couldn't neglect a belly like mine. You had to feed it 3 times a day, or it would shrivel up to nothing. Although it began to shrivel, I really didn't feel I was culinarily deprived. Just eating right. I had dropped from 225 to 200 pounds before wifey remarked, "Have you lost weight or something? Those pants are a bit too big." Nah hun, I probably was never as fat as you remember me to be. Seriously, these pants were always a little big. We support 2 of the local charity resale shops, and since I wear kind of generic men's cloths, it was easy to donate my big chinos and jeans and buy smaller ones that fit. All of the cloths are slightly worn and all look pretty much the same as the clothes I've always worn. Wifey has a few quirks. One that she inherited from her mother, who was an out-and-out hippie flower child who married a banker. Go figure. Neither woman liked perfume or scented deodorants and didn't use anything but clear nail polish. Her natural smell is quite pleasant, but you have to have your nose close to notice it. It was remarkable, then, when she came home one Thursday with some perfume on, thinking she was perhaps advertising her availability for loving. I gave her a hug, followed by a nuzzle and kiss in expectation, but no, apparently tonight was not the night. She went upstairs to shower before supper, which was another unusual event. It may have been the rejection of amorous intent that got me to thinking it had been a while since we made love, perhaps a couple of weeks ago, and God knows when the last time was that she initiated lovemaking. I had brought this issue up before, about me always asking for loving and never her. I had even suggested marriage counseling. She claimed that she loved me very much, but at this time in her life, she had a weak libido, and that was that. So, did the perfume come from a sample at a department store? I looked in her purse, but nothing there. At supper, nothing was out of place. The conversation was normal and there was casual affection. I was suspicious, and yes, I felt stupid going though the hamper looking for cum stains on her underwear. I didn't really expect any and saw none. Over the next week, I checked our phone records and computer, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. On subsequent Tuesdays, I smelled the same perfume on her, but never found the bottle. I didn't ask wifey as I figured I would get a bullshit answer, and yet I couldn't find anything obviously amiss. One evening, she did mention a job at the art museum she was going to apply for. I mentioned, I know Tomas Hoving, the business manager over there, quite well. What's the job? Do you want to meet him? The response was cold water. No, Chris, I don't want your friends to try to get me a job. I want to do it on my own. Well, be assured that they won't give you a job no matter who recommends you. I can get you the interview with the right person. It's up to you from there, but please yourself. What the hell? I thought, go for it, girl. Still, I thought nothing untoward about her changing jobs. So what can you do? Look for changes in behavior and hope they mean nothing. My weight got down to 190 during all of this, and my leg muscles had bulked up a bit, frankly. I looked good and felt good. I slept well. My pecker stood at attention every morning when I woke up. Even wifey noticed and complimented me on my appearance. Not that it resulted in anything like a surge in our lovemaking, but I began to notice other women now went a bit out of their way to chat with me. I must admit this latter bit generally occurred when I was walking the dog. Dogs do make people more accessible to chat, but the chats were increasingly broken off by me or the dog, as he is not interested in long talks when he wants to be walking. The dog walk soon got boring, starting as they did from the house every day, so first as a treat and later as a habit. The dog and I began taking a taxi to other areas around about 4 miles from our house. We get dropped off out there and then walk home. One Tuesday, as is my custom, I was up before Karen, made coffee for myself and tea for her. I was reading the paper when she came down for breakfast. Fruit plate on the table, English muffins by the toaster. "Why don't you look nice? What's with the shoes? You need to wipe the dust off of them. You've been wearing sandals for the last month or more." "Well, I thought they would look nice with this dress. Isn't that a summer sundress? I'd have thought sandals more in keeping with the season." "Chris, no one asks you for fashion advice, do they? There's a reason for that. I have a full day in the office, but I'll be home at the usual time." "What's on your schedule today?" "I have to see Kia's in construction. They got the contract to restore the Royal Theatre, and there's so much decorative work that if I get the job, I'm going to have to hire more help. Looking it over could take all day. Other than that, I'll be here when you get home." The site is a bit of a walk from our place, so the dog and I took a cab. The theater is a huge auditorium built in 1925. It's suitable for movies or live acts with 1,750 seats and saved by a local college last year from the wrecking ball. It was one of the driving forces in the rehabbing of what could be a lovely neighborhood. However, it was a pain in my butt. Sam Keesing didn't have a copy of the specification and wasn't sure what I should include in my bid, other than the plaster work. I explained that, of course, he could pay us to put up scaffolding, do the plaster work, and take it down. Then he could pay the painters and gilders to put scaffolding back up and pay them to take it down again. But where was the savings in that? Plus, we would know what plaster needed weeks to dry and what could be done right away. Letting me do it all would save at least a couple of months in completing the job. I think I sold him on expanding my scope. Kermit Keesing loved the alliteration, normally does new work, but his times are tough. He took this job and was a bit out of his element. I spent a lot of time taking pictures and crawling all over the place, getting some idea of the extent of the damage. The dog did easy time and snoozed peacefully for about 3 hours. I was about done by 11:30 and glad I was to be out in the air again. Hubris and I set out in the general direction of home, but I was hungry and wanted to check out a block of restaurants I had read about in the Sunday paper. By 12:30 we had walked about 2 miles and were traversing the restaurants, each with sidewalk seating out front. Both the dog and I were interested in the smells of food. I was surveying the lot to figure out what appealed to me. At the next to the last restaurant, I spotted my wife at an outside table, close to the building. She was clearly holding hands with a well-dressed older man. She probably would have noticed me if she wasn't so focused with happy intensity on what her dinner companion was saying. Of course, she didn't expect me to be there, and the dog was hidden by the other tables and a row of little potted bushes and such, so he hadn't given us away. If there had been any doubt as to it being her, the dog picked his nose up and gave a gentle woof, recognizing her scent. I put him in the heel position, lest he lunge into the restaurant, and walked past them. My mind was racing, with thoughts ranging from denial to homicidal rage. I continued around the block while my head cleared, until I came to the point where they were in view again. I was sure I didn't recognize the guy. He was clearly older than her by 20 years and had the look of money about him. By now, the table had been cleared and coffee served. I had stalled as long as I could. I had to make a decision, attack, flee or hide and follow them. What really decided it was that wifey's back was to me, so I could approach unrecognized. I put the dog in the heel position and walked up to them, keeping my eyes on the folks at the table next to them, so Studley wouldn't connect my approach with them. As I closed in, I saw wifey had her shoe off and was rubbing his leg with her foot, which sported red nail polish. As I came abreast of the table, I picked up an empty chair and sat down at their table, clearly startling the two of them. "Karen, I was just walking by and saw you here. Who's the new man?" She visibly jumped and yanked her hand out of his, with a look of panic in her eyes. While the dog was pestering her with his exuberant, doggy greeting, I nudged her shoe out of reach and stuck out my hand to Studley. Hi, I'm Chris Harlow. The habits of courtesy carry us through all embarrassment. Archibald Morgan, and with no prompting, I help out at the party office with Karen. Archie, this is my husband, Chris, and our dog Hubris. What are you doing here? Gee, I asked you first. What you two are doing here? You tell me. Her foot with screamy red painted toenails was scrambling around under the table trying to find her shoe. Oh, just having lunch. And your plans for afterwards? We're going back to work. Of course. Oh, of course. Well, good. That relieves my mind. When I saw you holding hands and you playing footsie under the table with your red toes, I thought that this might be a local Democratic sequel to Bill and Monica. You're not a cigar smoker, are you, Archibald? I heard a guffaw from the table behind me, but Studley smirked and shook his head. Afraid not. Planning to put something else in then, I suppose. Well, you folks get along with your afternoon. There's a long cab ride back to your office from here. Karen, I assume you'll be home at the regular time? I'll have supper ready and a dessert, so please don't bother bringing home a cream pie. I don't think she knew what a cream pie is because she looked befuddled. The guys behind me did. Another chuckle and a slightly embarrassed grin came from Studley. Chris, I resent your insinuations. This is nothing more than a lunch. I stood up and returned the chair to the table where I found it and glanced directly at the two guys behind me who had been hanging on every word. So I asked them, well, jury of two, since you are unknown to the principals here gathered, I ask you, can this woman be believed? Hell no, buddy. They were talking about how to communicate with each other when they're away from the office without you finding out. Archie, as she calls him, arrived with 2 throwaway cell phones and gave her one. It's in her purse. They were planning to go to his house this afternoon. Sorry, dear, the jury has voted for conviction. The judge will now retire and consider the sentence. By the way, keep the phone, Karen. You may need it soon. Come, Hubris. Let's go to the guys. She named the dog. They laughed. The figures. When I resumed to my walk, I felt bad. Awful, actually. But I thought I had made the right decision. I felt bad because I really loved Karen. But I rather thought she was now out of my life. In fact, I had lost my appetite for both her and for lunch. You can only lose someone to trust once. After that, you may say, of course I trust you, but it's not like before. I wondered who exactly Archibald was to her. The obvious options were sex buddies, male shoulder to cry on during the divorce she was planning, or the long-awaited love of her life and her new husband. I called my younger sister, who was also self-employed, and a fact-checker for assorted media. In essence, if a news source claims so-and-so divorced in 1978, my sister checks the fact. She's very good at digging information out of the internet. Jesus, you online at the moment? Yeah. Why? You and Big Hubie get lost again? Nope. Big secret, though. This is completely legal but very confidential. You can't tell anyone in the family about what I need you to do. You're kidding. Nope. Go online and look up Archibald Morgan. He's about 60 years old and lives in the Philly. I want to know all the dirt about him. Credit rating, marriage, money, etc. If you have to pay to get into databases, I'll pay you back. Call me on my cell phone when you get some good stuff. The deadline is 5 p.m. I can do it, Chris. But why the secrecy? What's happening? I think Karen may be getting interested in him. I need your help now. You got it. Off the top of my head, I recall Morgan is from old money but has none himself. Bit of a rotter, married to Elizabeth Waldrop Morgan, who has beaucoup bucks and is a society maven. Archibald is a man about town who does nothing but is accepted socially because of his wife of many years. Don't loan him money and regard anything he says with suspicion. That's the nutshell biography. I'll get some specifics by 5 p.m. I especially wanted to know how much money he has. How the hell do you know all that off the top of your head? Well, like I say, he gets around and is in the papers quite a bit. That, and I did the fact checks on a book about his father a few years ago. I'm drawing a blank on the author's name, but it felt like I wrote half of the book. Great. Look forward to hearing from you later and thank you. Well. Knowing the enemy is the key to winning the battle. As I was walking by anyway, I rummaged in the 2 or 3 trash cans nearest to our house, but didn't find what I now suspected I might find sooner or later. Obviously, the next step was Karen's. She could have skipped work and beat me home or keep me waiting while she had sex with Archie dry and try to come up with a good story. I guess the former if Archie was a passing fancy and the latter if our marriage was over. Happily, it was the former. She was home and perhaps Archie was a passing fancy. She greeted me earnestly. "Chris, I'm sorry. It wasn't what you think. Archie's going through a divorce and needed someone to talk with. That was all. And what? Look, I want you to tell me what in detail with dates and places what's been going on especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm telling you, Chris, nothing's been going on. I love you. So this was the first time you dressed especially for him and hid the nail polish from me. You know that was wrong. The two of you hid across town to have an intimate lunch followed by an afternoon of sex in the house of the guy you wanted to help, where you could offer consolation for his marital worries in private, make dear Archie feel what less unloved, out of kindness but overcoming great personal disgust. Hold his hand and give him a hard-on as you reassured his masculine vanity. You make it sound so shabby. It wasn't like that. So tell me how it was then, 'cause surely it's not true that nothing happened between you. But nothing did happen. My cell phone rang. As I reached for my cell phone, Karen said, "Leave it, Chris. They'll call back." Grabbing the phone, I responded, this conversation isn't going anywhere anyway. You're still in damage control mode. Hello? No, I'm not. Okay, what was the outcome of that? It would seem so. Okay, let me know. Bye. It was my sister, announcing that Archie and his wife just celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. And there was an allegation against Archie of rape and related pictures of at least 2 naked women posted on the internet. Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next part to see what happens next.